Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
Hey there guys, Unofficial Star Wars here. Hope you're all doing well, and in this video we're going to be talking about Andor Season 2. So without further ado, we're going to hop right on into it, taking a read from the Direct's article. I'm going to have their full article linked in the description down below. As it reads, Andor producer explains how Season 2 will be quote-unquote very different from Season 1. According to the producer of Andor, the upcoming second season of the show is going to be quite different than what the world is watching right now with Season 1 of Andor. Much to the surprise of many, the Disney Plus series following Cassian Andor from Rogue One, the spin-off movie in 2016, has been beyond phenomenal for many. In fact, lots of people have claimed it to be the best pieces of Star Wars storytelling ever, especially on Disney Plus. Previously, it has been revealed while the first 12 episodes of the show will cover the span of an overall year of Season 1, the next batch for Season 2 will begin filming very soon, as we have covered here on the channel. It will be exploring the next 4 years leading up to the events of the Rogue One movie. It's that unique shift in storytelling structure which will help it, at least in part, make the final half of the Andor series very different from the first season. And even on that, in my own thoughts and opinions, is something that makes me worry a little bit for when it does come to the second season here of the show. Seeing that there's going to be so many different time jumps, I don't really feel like we're going to be able to really get to know our characters that well as we are with Season 1. To really feel like we're there with them is something that Season 1 of this show has done very greatly, and really diving deeply into the emotions and how these characters are feeling almost every other second of their story here. I feel like is something that Season 2, having so many different time jumps, is going to kind of disassociate us with that, kind of in a sense. However, as the article goes on to talk about, in an interview with Rolling Stone, Andor producer Tony Gilroy discussed how Season 2 of his hit show would differ from the first season. To start, the filmmaker noted that having a 5-season run, which was the original plan, would have been physically impossible. In that quote, he says, "It just would have been physically impossible. We're about to start shooting the second half this month, so we've been preparing for the whole last year. There's 2 directors in Pinewood Studios in the UK that are prepping right now, and I'm going to get ready to get over there and trying to get all of our scripts together," ending the quote there. He continued explaining how the final season and the second season will be quote-unquote very different, and that he hopes it will quote-unquote will make the meal feel very satisfying, ending the quote there. And that full quote there, as Tony Gilroy explains, "And I'm hoping that we're gonna do it in the second half, will make the meal feel very satisfying, because first year is really about him becoming, and the last line of this tranche of 12 episodes will sum up where we've been trying to get to the events of Rogue One. And we come back a year later, it will be very different. The next 4 years of the story are not about becoming a revolutionary, they're about learning to be a leader, and how difficult it is to put the alliance together, and what happens to people who are the original gangsters versus the establishment of a lot of different other issues," ending the quote right there. As the article goes on to read, with the first season, the story takes its time exploring what is a relatively small time frame, fleshing out as many details as possible. How could that change going into Season 2, which will cover 4 years instead of just 1? Gilroy specifically pointed out how they found quote-unquote playing around with the negative space was something they enjoyed, while also teasing betrayals amongst the cast in future installments. In that full quote, Tony Gilroy says, "I'm carrying forward something like 30 characters, so what becomes interesting is now we can play the negative space. When you jump a year, what happened in between, you know? The people, you know what their trajectory was. It's energizing. We will be starting new characters, obviously, in the next 700 pages. There will be all kinds of new things, and will be just as granular as ever were. And really, the second half is about what does time do to these people. People grow up, people get tired, and people betray each other, and people change their minds, and people get weak, and people go crazy," ending the quote right there. So in a sense, he's kind of like teasing at the idea that not everybody has a concluding, I guess, story arc throughout the entirety of the show. Something that had been brought up in the recent attention here as a kind of rumor slash theory that had been going around a little bit is that there could be the potential to have even more Rogue One spin-offs. I mean, for the characters, especially, like specifically for characters that never had their story finished in this overall show, because they're introducing so many characters, and there is nothing wrong with that, because that is the point of the show, is to introduce a lot of different characters that are just normal everyday people, just like you and I as the fans are, and to kind of give them a story, but not necessarily conclude each and every one. So the overall fan theory / rumor that had been going around is that has the possibility and the potential to spark even more Star Wars Rogue One spin-off shows. However, I think there's a lot of other Star Wars spin-off shows that they already have and other better ideas, to be honest. Yeah, you never know though, maybe a comic book series I think could work very well as well. Aside from all that, as the article goes on to read, formerly a director of season 1 of Andor had stated how Gilroy had a mandate to keep droids and aliens in the background for the most part. But why? This is something that we have noticed throughout this overall show here, especially with season 1, is that my only complaint as a Star Wars fan is that there's a lackluster of, well, I guess Star Wars, contributes, such as having a lot of different aliens or droids in the background. The director noted how it was all due to the logistics, and how if you introduce a character, you also have to explain all their plumbing and their health issues. As in that they really tried to overly analyze each and every character that they do introduce here into this overall show. That doesn't apply for every single character, but for an extent, just about all of them. In that full quote, Tony Gilroy says, "I think we'll be addressing some of that as we go along a little bit more. Sometimes it's problematic in storytelling where you just can't introduce a character. You have to introduce all their plumbing and all their health issues. People said, why didn't you have aliens in Nakarnia 5, where Andor is imprisoned? You see the 5 facilities that are in the lake there, so it's easy for me to imagine that there's another one that's all aliens. But what are the mechanics of what we can do and build? And what would the bathroom be like on that factory floor? I don't even really know. You get into a bunch of other issues that become just a little bit too complicated sometimes to go into, but we will be doing more of that as we go along." Ending the quote right there. And that does really give a good point, I think, in my own thoughts and opinions of, like, who said that there wasn't maybe aliens in the background? I mean, we do see 5 other imprisonments there on that planet, so who's to say that there isn't one that's filled with different types of alien species, or one that could be filled with droids? I mean, who's to say? And that is something that we have touched on a little bit here on the channel regarding the overall Andor show, is that us Star Wars fans are able to make up maybe different explanations in our own headcanon, so to speak, of maybe a different character doesn't get its full-on character arc or conclusion or anything like that. From there, as a Star Wars fan, we're able to kind of make up our own thoughts and opinions on that, how maybe their story went on from there. As the article goes on to continue, despite that, the storyteller, Tony Gilroy, promised that there will be a lot more about the aliens later on, in that quote saying, "And I understand that there's some people that feel that there's been shaded slightly, but there's probably the primary reason. It adds a level of complexity, as he had mentioned, and it adds a level of political complexity as well. But we all will be going there. Look, we're just going all the way to Rogue One. There's a lot that's coming up." Ending the quote right there. And so from there, the article goes on to talk about how a change in structure isn't necessarily bad. Essentially kind of recapping to what I said at the beginning of this video regarding that, I think that they're changing the structure overall of this show, especially when you go into season 2, regarding so many different time jumps that would be taking place. You're not able to keep up with each and every character. Some get left behind, so to speak, as Tony Gilroy kind of seemingly confirms there as well at that not every character is going to have their story complete. Maybe something happens in between a time jump, and it's kind of from there for us Star Wars fans to kind of come up with and think about maybe what we want to think in our own headcanon, so to speak. The article from there continues to talk about how, seeing how well received the first season has already been, many seem to have no doubt that the show will continue to maintain that level of quality overall. And there's a difference between storytelling quality and overall production quality. However, this video isn't necessarily about that. There's no denying, however, that covering 4 separate years of time will lead to the second season feeling distinctly different from the first season, especially. In a sense, it could also even have a more episodic kind of feel to it, something in the regards of maybe The Mandalorian or The Book of Boba Fett, where there's more of a slighter kind of time jump there, kind of in a sense, or maybe like Obi-Wan Kenobi or any of the Clone Wars animated shows. Especially seeing as there will be 4 separate bundles of 3-episode arcs, as they're continuing on that 3-episode arc style here with that they've done here with the first season. It could carry on here with the second season, and it could work even better at that. However, the closer the story gets to the Rogue One movie and those events, the more it will feel necessary to connect to the wider universe and its library of characters and overall plot. Up to this point, the series has been fairly fairly focused on its own dealings, with Mon Mothma especially being the biggest connection to the wider franchise, the wider galaxy, and really Rogue One. Well, aside from Cassian Andor himself as well. As the article goes on to conclude, going forward, it would make sense for the story to bring in characters that fans know and love, people such as Hera from Star Wars Rebels, who goes on to have high rankings and a general involvement in the rebellion. Same thing could be applied to any of the Star Wars Rebels characters, such as Ahsoka Tano. The series could also even bring in Grand Admiral Thrawn at some point as well, as an Imperial officer tasked with tracking down rebel activity, something he excels at, Andor does. And from there, that is where the article concludes, and I completely contradict everything that they just said there with that concluding kind of statement there, saying that, hey, other characters from other shows, such as Star Wars Rebels, could show up here in the Andor show. That's exactly the opposite of what Tony Gilroy has ever said here about this show. There's not going to be any fan service in the show whatsoever, and it doesn't need fan service even. It's been fairly regarded and fairly agreed upon the fact that this show has been absolutely beyond amazing without fan service of already well-known characters. So regarding with that, that's something I completely disagree with. However, on all your thoughts and opinions on that and everything else we discussed here in this overall video here regarding Andor Season 2, what are you guys looking forward to seeing here with the finale episodes of Andor, and what do you guys want to see there with Season 2 there of the show there as well? I'd absolutely love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it, as it really does help with the channel, and check out Instagram and official Star Wars for more Star Wars related content, guys. Thanks so much for watching today's video. As always, I'm going to first be with you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great one, guys. Peace out.